What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we have the final This Week at Bungie update before Season 15, and so they've got a lot to talk about, and specifically this week they focus on weapons. And we've got tuning to various archetypes, expected nerfs, but also some buffs. They speak about exotics and a few things to note going into the reveal and launch next week. So guys, I hope you dig the video as always, and if you aren't subscribed to the channel yet, then feel free to hit that button below because there's going to be a lot of Destiny content to tune in for. But now, let's get into the video. And diving immediately into the TWAB right here, firstly, Bungie reveals some new weapons, and they say we're holding a lot of details on Season of the Redacted close to the chest, but we do want to show off some of the weapons you'll be earning next season. And so next season's Ritual Quest weapon is a rocket launcher with the Explosive Light perk. And as is the custom, you'll receive a new quest to earn this weapon, and then can collect Gambit, Crucible, and Vanguard themed weapon ornaments through additional quests to customize its look. So that's pretty interesting. It does have a somewhat unique look right there as well. So let us know if you'll be jumping in to get that new rocket launcher next week. On top of this though, they say they're adding 3 weapons as post-game rewards for completing Vanguard strikes, as well as Gambit and Crucible matches, and these will drop randomly after completing these activities with random rolls. So there will be some new playlist drops. And additionally, they say they have plans to freshen up the loot pool of the Prophecy dungeon. They've seen a lot of feedback to bring forward weapons from the original Trials of the Nine pool, and we thought that adding these to the Nine themed dungeon was a great fit. These weapons have also been upgraded with random rolls, and certain ones will drop from specific encounters of the dungeon. So Trials of the Nine weapons are back inside of the Prophecy dungeon, which is pretty awesome. And they say they're also updating the world pool with some fresh drops. These are actually some Year 1 weapons, I believe, right there, that are going to be popping up with random perks. So just a little sample of some of the new weapons we're going to see next season. And here they speak about some of the sandbox stuff, and they say that Season 15 introduces legendary Stasis weapons. And so Stasis power weapons are in the power slot, but all other Stasis weapons will be in the kinetic slot, and this is to avoid overcrowding the energy slot, and so that it's reasonable to use one in match game content. On top of this, Stasis weapons don't intrinsically do anything different from other weapons of other damage types, but they are the only weapons that can roll with Stasis perks. And they say they generally intend Stasis perks with slowing or freezing effects to have a kill trigger, this being easy enough to trigger in PvE, and fun to use but not obnoxious to play against in PvP. So that's interesting. Stasis weapons, instead of totally being affected by the element, are actually going to be affected by specific perks. So it sounds interesting. Give us your thoughts down below. Next though, they talk about the quick swap glitch, and they say this glitch uses combinations of inputs to animation cancel, allowing near instant weapon swaps. And we want the handling stat to continue to have value on weapons. So essentially they have fixed that quick swap glitch. Next though, they speak about primary ammo, and they say all primary ammo weapons will now have infinite ammo. And they point out that running out of kinetic ammo in hard PvE content, or because you're on a tear in PvP, is not fun. On top of this, inertia override has been adjusted to account for there being no primary bricks. Drop mag's downside of reducing reserve ammo is now almost meaningless, so they've reworked it to be plus reload speed and minus magazine size. On top of this, compact arrow shaft's upside of increasing reserve ammo is also being adjusted and has been reworked to be plus reload and plus handling. On top of this, they're updating other perks that refer to reserves in a way that's no longer accurate. They speak about Fighting Lion and Sweet Business, which we'll touch on in a moment, but also all Trials weapons available in Season 15 will now have 7 perks in each column, where it was previously 5. So they are touching weapons in a whole series of different ways right here. They also talk about reissuing weapons, and they say the guidelines for reissues moving forward will be to remove the least useful 2 or 3 perks and add 2 or 3 newer perks that give the weapon some new options and may result in an entirely new top tier role without removing the old one. And so in the patch next week, they've also added 1 or 2 of the original perks to each column for the lunar weapons. Those are the reissued moon weapons, and it's going to be the same case for the Dreaming City weapons. But now they have changes for specific weapon archetypes, and they say exotics will receive these changes as written, unless otherwise mentioned in the exotic section that's coming up in a second. And so for breach grenade launchers, they say they are an increasing pain point in PvP, and so they've reduced the blast radius by 0.4 meters, reduced splash damage by 20, which reduces the total damage for direct hits from 220 to 200. To offset some of these changes though, they've increased damage in PvE by 12%. And they point out that Wither Horde will be unaffected, so change right there that will affect both PvP and PvE slightly differently. For machine guns in PvE, they're getting a buff of 20%, which is pretty good. And for scout rifles and hand cannons, they say they've increased damage versus miners by 15%, which should make those weapons more effective in more difficult PvE content. They do talk about a whole bunch of changes to fusion rifles. And to sum it up, they say they've increased PvE damage bonus such that all subfamilies have a 15% PvE bonus. They've pushed subfamilies further apart, adjusting charge time, shots fired per burst, as well as damage. And so high impact fusion rifles now charge slower, and while still strong, they require more planning to use effectively, so the base charge time has been increased from 0.86 seconds to 1 second. Shots per burst has been reduced from 7 to 5. They've also reduced the total damage per burst, and with the reduced shots per burst, the weapons will now be less reliant on stability, so can stack a bit more range. They say precision and adaptive frames are close to unchanged. Base charge time is unchanged, shots per burst is unchanged at 7, but they have very slightly increased the total damage per burst. Rapid fires will charge faster, allowing them to be used reactively against charging enemies, so base charge time decreased from 0.54 seconds to 0.46 seconds. Shots per burst has been increased from 7 to 9, and they've also increased the total damage per burst. They say they will now be a little more reliant on stability, but with the increased damage, they're less reliant on range. And on top of this, they are adjusting some fusion rifle perks, so backup plan's implementation was incompatible with the fusion rifle changes, so they've removed plus 100 to charge time stat and adjusted the charge time multiplier from 0.85 to 0.7, and it will now scale damage by 0.8. Liquid coils and accelerated coils needed a rework for similar reasons, both converted to scale charge time and damage instead of modifying the charge time stat, and the final effect is much the same as before, but these are now more robust. However, they won't visibly change the charge time stat in the inspection screen. On top of this, the Adept charge time mod felt pointless, and so they've changed its functionality to scale charge time directly instead of changing the charge time stat without adjusting the damage. So quite a few changes right there for fusion rifles. And yes, these changes will affect exotic fusions as well. And right here they speak about exotics, so of course we all knew that the nerf to Anarchy was coming up. And so they've reduced the total reserve plus magazine ammunition from 26 to 16, but they've also reduced its damage by 30% versus bosses. And they point out that champions are not bosses, so it's going to have less ammo and do less damage specifically to bosses. So overall it's still going to be a pretty good weapon. Just a little bit less OP, I suppose. Let us know what you think about it. On top of this, Xenophage, they say, was already top notch, and so it didn't need to benefit from the global machine gun buff. And so now has a slower rate of fire to compensate, and they've reduced the rate of fire from 120 to 90 RPM, but it also receives less of the machine gun PvE damage buff than other weapons. For the Fighting Lion, they say its reserve ammo has been increased from a lot to infinite. It will receive the same changes as other breach grenade launchers, but also they've reduced the base reload stat to 0, and that does mean it'll reload very slowly, but it now increases reload speed to its previous level on damaging multiple enemies with one grenade. They do say that they'll keep an eye on that change and adjust it if necessary. Kind of an interesting one. For the Vex Mythoclast though, it gets its buff, and the PvE damage bonus has been increased by 40%. On top of this, the range stat has been increased to be near best in class for high impact auto rifles. They've increased the stability stat and reworked the catalyst to grant stability and damage after a kill. On top of this, they've increased the rate of fire from 360 to 390. And reduce the linear fusion rifle mode charge time from 820 to 533, which is the same as a standard linear fusion rifle. On top of this though, it will no longer lose overcharge stacks on stow, except when in linear fusion rifle mode. That sounds like a pretty good buff right there. And then we have buffs to the other exotic fusion rifles, so for Merciless, they've updated the perk to account for fewer shots per burst, and it should build up charge rate at the same amount per burst as before, but they've reduced the damage penalty for increasing the charge rate by 40%. Jotun is going to see reduced charge time from 0.82 to 0.78 seconds. So it's going to charge faster, but they've slightly reduced the damage per shot. On top of this, for Bastion, they've reduced damage by 15%. And that's inside of PvP. They've also increased the spread angle by 10%, but have increased PvE damage by 25%. And then we have a change for Sweet Business, and they say it now refills the magazine on picking up special and heavy ammo instead of primary. And then finally right here we have a couple of changes for perks. So for Firing Line, they have reduced the damage bonus to plus 20% precision damage for all supported weapon archetypes. And also it will roll on some sniper rifles, linear fusion rifles, and machine guns, and maybe some other stuff in the future. On top of this, certain damage perks only affected high impact damage on explosive weapons, so they've updated these specific perks to increase detonation damage, and that's going to be Kill Clip, Rampage, and Adrenaline Junkie. They've also fixed incorrect rarity on some recently shipped weapon perks. And then they say they've updated all grenade launcher and rocket launcher VFX, and legendary fusion and linear fusion rifles now have distinct damage type charge VFX, so they're going to look just a little bit different in the game, which will be interesting. Something else that we should touch on outside of TWAB, but today there was a leak which revealed that Destiny 2 will be getting its own anti-cheat using BattlEye, which is an anti-cheat system used in a series of different titles. And so following the leak, Destiny 2 on Twitter did say, our partnership with BattlEye will soft launch next season, just another step toward a level playing field for all. And Cosmo added that of course this was revealed a little bit earlier than planned. The soft launch will happen next week to do more testing, but this won't be a 100% fix that'll solve the problem forever, and it's going to be a step in their ongoing efforts to ensure a fair playing field. So, essentially, anti-cheat is going to start rolling out for Destiny with the start of Season 15, but it's something they're going to be working on and improving throughout the course of the year. Either way, it's a massive positive that a more coherent anti-cheat system is coming for Destiny 2, so give us your thoughts about that down below. So there we go guys, a massive list of changes for the new season. Be sure to get subscribed right here on the channel, and I'll keep you up to date over the next week or so with the major reveals and new content. If you've enjoyed this video, also feel free to drop a rating down below and give us any of your thoughts on what Bungie spoke about this week in the comment section. However, for today, thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys very soon.